Welcome to the review video for quiz number 6 in Old Testament chronology. And I'm actually going to make two different videos to help you on this quiz because it's actually a rather lengthy quiz and quite difficult. This first video is going to deal with the basic questions that we're going to have. The second video will deal with the essay questions. And yes, that is plural, essay questions. And so this part will deal with just the basic questions. Let me tell you what this quiz will look like, and then we'll kind of get into the content there. The first several questions are multiple choice questions. There are a couple of true and false questions. And then there's a big matching section, matching the different kings of the divided kingdom with a fact about them. That might be the most difficult part about this, is keeping all the different kings straight. Now, I did pick kings that were kind of had more important things about them, but hopefully you'll be able to keep them all straight. Then there are several essay questions, and I mean 2 pages worth of essay questions. So anyway, make sure you're listening on the second video that we make of this. All right, let's go over some of the content here. Of course, we stopped with the last quiz dealing with King David, and so there are a couple of questions about David and Solomon as well. We mentioned the fact that David, of course, ruled over Judah for 7 years and 6 months. And so he wasn't king over all of Israel. He did rule for 40 years, just as Saul had ruled for 40 years. And his son Solomon also ruled for 40 years. So 40 plus 40 plus 40 equals 120 years, which is how long the United Kingdom stage lasted. We mentioned the fact that during the time of his rule over Judah, of course, there was civil war. Saul's son Ishbosheth tried to lay claim to the throne, and of course, he was eventually killed by some of his people, and David ended up killing those people as well. We mentioned the fact that as Solomon began to take the throne, David instructed Solomon that he needed to deal with, or you might say punish, a couple of people that David hadn't been able to punish. And we mentioned, of course, Shimei, the Benjamite that had given him such a hard time when he fled Jerusalem. We mentioned Joab, who had killed multiple people that worked with David, and although David used him quite a bit, was a pretty bad guy. And then we mentioned, of course, Abiathar, who helped Adonijah at the end when he tried to take the throne of Solomon. So we mentioned those things. We mentioned the fact that Solomon did reign for 40 years, a very powerful king. He is the king that built the temple. And we mentioned, of course, that magic number, 480 years after Exodus, the temple began to be built. And so that was mentioned. Solomon did have some help in building the temple. Hiram, king of Tyre, of course, the Tyrians, known as skilled craftsmen, they provided quite a bit of the cedar wood that was used in the temple, and also some of the skilled craftsmen. We also mentioned David, of course, had multiple wives. His first wife, of course, Michal, and we don't want to forget about her. She was the one that kind of got in a fight with David later on, and I don't know that it was necessarily her fault, but nonetheless, that is what happened. We go on to the divided kingdom, and let's just go through some of these kings that were in the divided kingdom, and just make sure that we know certain things about them. In the northern kingdom, of course, the very first king of the northern kingdom was Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. He's the one that built the 2 golden calves and really started the idolatry in Israel in the northern kingdom there. Of course, we mentioned another king, Baasha. He is known for wiping out Jeroboam's family, just as the prophecy said. He's also one that fought with Asa quite a bit. We mentioned Zimri, who is the shortest ruling king of both the northern and southern kingdom. He only ruled for 7 days, and then, of course, committed suicide by burning his house down on him. Omri was the one that did surround him. Omri, of course, the father of Ahab. He's the one that fought a civil war in the northern kingdom and eventually became the king of Israel. Of course, we mentioned Ahab, that wicked king who married Queen Jezebel and caused so many problems there for the prophet Elijah. We also mentioned, let's see here, I think that was where we stopped on most of the kings of Israel. I will say there are a couple of kings I accidentally put on here that I'll give you the answers to, so you get some free questions there. But in the kings of the southern kingdom, we have Rehoboam. Of course, that is the son of Solomon. He is the one that ignored the advice of the old men and caused the division of the kingdom to begin with. Of course, we mentioned good old King Asa, who was a great king, but had some rebellion later on in his time as king. And of course, we mentioned he died of a foot disease later on. Jehoshaphat, his son, of course, was a good king as well, led a revival in Israel. But Jehoshaphat did have one problem. He did compromise quite a bit with Ahab and Ahab's family. And as a result of it, caused him many, many problems. Another king that we've mentioned that we ought to know is Uzziah. Uzziah, of course, contracted leprosy as a result of trying to overtake the temple and take the job of that. His son Jotham, of course, ruled as his viceroy for many of his years there, and then eventually ruled as king himself. We mentioned, of course, another king, King Hezekiah, who, of course, was another godly king. Of course, it was Hezekiah who prayed that God would heal him after he was told he would die, and the sun went back 10 degrees on the sundial there, and of course later he had some issues of his own. He had a son named Manasseh, who was probably about the most wicked king of Israel, unless you consider Ahab maybe as well. Manasseh is the longest ruling king of both the southern and northern kingdoms, and he is the king that was actually taken captive by the king of Assyria, but then eventually released and got back to his kingdom and ruled for his last years. Then we mentioned another king, King Josiah. Of course, he began ruling at the age of 8. He is the one that led quite a revival. They found, of course, the book of the law in the temple, and that caused him to turn to God and created a great revival during his time and led one of the greatest Passovers that ever existed. Of course, we mentioned several of the kings at the end of Judah. Of course, Jehoiakim, the king, the first king to go into captivity under Nebuchadnezzar. Of course, Daniel went in his captivity. We mentioned King Jehoiachin, and of course, he was the second one under his captivity. The prophet Ezekiel was taken captive. Jehoiachin's also the king that he was made viceroy apparently at age 8, made the sole king at age 18, and that accounts for the two different years mentioned in his life. Of course, he had a curse pronounced on him, in which he was said that none of his children would rule the king, take the throne of Israel anymore. And of course, that is true. The last king of Israel was not his son, but rather his uncle. Of course, we mentioned that Jesus Christ is in the line of Jehoiachin, but he's not related to Jehoiachin by blood. He is related to him through the lineage of Joseph, mentioned in Matthew chapter 1. Jesus, though, is related to King David through the lineage of Mary, found in the lineage of Luke chapter 1. And of course, that dealt with that. We mentioned as well the last king of Judah was King Zedekiah. And of course, he under his kingdom, that is when Jerusalem was eventually sacked and burned to the ground. I think that concludes most of the information that we need for that, and maybe even a couple of the essay questions as well. So make sure you check out the next video for a review on the essay questions.